Hello, Your Grace. My name's Luke. I'm from Murray McCormack in Year 12.
Luke, is it?
Luke.
Luke, good on
I'm
you.
in the Year 12. I'd like to say, what is the most challenging aspect of your job, and what do you love most about it?
Let me answer the second part first. What do I like most about the job? In one sense, what I'm going to say might sound like, well, he's got to say that because he's here with a whole pile of students from our schools. But before I decided to be a priest, I'd already made up my mind that I wanted to be a teacher. And so before I became a priest, I was a teacher, and I joined a religious order that is involved in schools, although we don't have one over here. So my heart is really in teaching. And so one of the things I really do enjoy about my role is the chance that I have to get involved in schools, not as much as I would like to. And that's why I enjoy days like this so much, because it kind of reminds me a bit of my past life, so to speak. I taught in a big boys' school in Melbourne that had an auditorium which could almost be a replica of this one. So that's a really good thing. But it's interesting, when I decided I wanted to be a teacher and I was at Teachers College, there was something nagging at me about, I don't want to say being a teacher wasn't enough, because we've got lots of teachers here and I wouldn't want to say that because it's not true. But for me, being a teacher, but also somehow or other being able to share my faith with people in a really direct way was really important to me. And that's why I ended up joining a religious order where I could be a priest and a teacher at the same time. So that's probably the thing that I like most about the role. And I'm lucky, as the Archbishop, I get to go into a lot of schools. I visit a lot of parishes. When I visit the parish during the week, I'll always go and visit the primary school. And many of your schools I've been into already, and those that I haven't been to, I've got on my list to come and visit as soon as I can. So I'm pretty lucky from that point of view. As far as challenges are concerned, I'll just mention two. One is, I won't be saying anything to anybody here that you don't already know, and that is one of the big challenges the church faces is this terrible scandal of sexual abuse. And so trying to deal well with that and make sure that we heal, if we can, what's happened from the past, but make sure that the future's much better. That's a big challenge for me. It's an urgent priority for me, and I'm doing my best with that. So that would be one of the big challenges. I think the other one is, and this might make sense to a lot of you. I'm 61, so I'm getting to be an old guy now. But when I was going to school in the late 50s and in the 60s, I come from, just as many of you would, come from what I would call just an average Catholic family background. So there was myself and my older brother, and as a family we went to Mass each weekend. And being a Catholic was an important part of our lives, but it wasn't something that sort of swamped everything. But the values that Mum and Dad were trying to communicate to my brother and to me were very similar to the values that were being taught to me at school. I went to a Catholic primary school and then a Catholic secondary school, and that would be the same for most of you as well. But the big difference was, in the 1960s, this is my judgment, other people here of similar vintage might disagree with me, but in the 1960s, our society more or less was built on the same kinds of values that we in the church would hold to. And I think that's the big change, that the things that are core values for us as Christians aren't always shared by the majority of people in our society. So that's the big change between when I was your age, say, and the situation we face now. So as the bishop, trying to work out how I can help people, not just me on my own, all of us together, how we can help people see the value in the Christian way of life and the Christian way of looking at life, and try to help people see it really is worth committing yourselves to. I think that's probably the biggest challenge that I would identify. That's a long answer, sorry about that, but anyway, that's Bishop Don, would you want to add anything to that? Or?
Yes, I think the biggest challenge, as far as I can see, is being able to present the message of the gospel to people today in a way that people will understand. And as the Archbishop just said, because there's a growing number of people within our community that is untouched by the church and by the gospel, have never even heard of it. The challenge, I think, is to find a way in which we can engage with these people and to do it in a way that makes sense to them. And I suppose that's where a number of the new movements in the church have been able to engage with people, because they talk about their experience of God and their experience of Jesus. And your own experience has power because it is an experience that you have. It's valid because it's something that has happened to you. So sometimes talking to people on that level bears a lot more fruit. So hopefully that's the challenge, and hopefully we'll have the means by which we can engage with people as they think about these big questions of life. You know, why we're here, what sort of person should I be in this society, what should our society be like? And much of what you've heard already this morning about LifeLink, I think helps us understand the sort of society that we want.
Thanks, Luke.
Hi, I'm Caitlin from Servite College.
What was the name, sorry?
Caitlin.
Caitlin.
I was just wondering, as a school, as a community, is there a way that we can commit more long-term to programs such as LifeLink?
I think the answer is yes. One of the things that pops into my mind straight away is, if you think back to the video that we looked at, you know, the variety of different agencies that we have in the Archdiocese. Many of these agencies, some of them are quite professional and get a lot of government money, and you could choose to have a career, for example, in what you might call the welfare or social service area, and make that your career. That would be one way that you could commit long term, and perhaps decide to see whether there were job opportunities within the Catholic sector, so to speak, because then the values would be in harmony with your values. But these groups also rely a lot on volunteers, and there may be ways in which people can volunteer their time and their efforts to help. So that would be one answer, I think. I'd also want to say, I'd just refer back to one of the slides that I used. And look, it's easy for someone like me to say this, and it's a hard thing for us to kind of work on. It can take a lifetime to work on it. But at one stage when I was talking about the Good Samaritan story, I was saying that, you know, that Good Samaritan who stopped and helped the person who'd been beaten up, the thing that made the difference for him was he had eyes that were open and on the lookout for someone who might need his help. And he had ears that were kind of tuned in. And more than anything else, he had a generous heart, so he was willing to help where he could see a need. I think there's a bit of a responsibility on each one of us, and it picks up something that Bishop Don just said. What kind of person do I want to be? Because particularly people, I think, whether you're in year 7 or year 12 or somewhere in between, more than any other time, I would think, the years at secondary school are the years where you actually build your future. And I don't just mean build your future in terms of your career or those sorts of things. I mean build your future in terms of the kind of person you're going to be. You make important choices about all sorts of things every day that will then have an impact on your future. So I think in the end, all of this stuff that we're talking about, LifeLink and helping people in need, it all comes down to the heart. Have I got a heart that wants to help? And in large measure, we're responsible for shaping our own hearts by the choices we make. So I'd say two things. The practical thing is you might choose a career in this field, you might find a way of volunteering, and all of that would be fantastic. But the really important thing is, what can I do? And this is where your schools can really be a big help. Catholic schools are so well structured to help in this regard. What can I do to shape myself into the kind of person who makes really good choices, knowing that what I decide today is going to have an influence on what I become tomorrow? Does that kind of answer the question, or have I missed it completely? It's okay? Thanks.
My name's Peter from Chisholm Catholic College, and I was just wondering, what's your usual day like, and what do you do, and how often do you get to visit people that are in need?
It's very hard to say that there would be a typical day. So today, for example, I'm here this morning. I'll go back into the cathedral office after lunch, and I've got some appointments this afternoon, and then I'm going out to the Redemptorist Monastery in North Perth this evening to launch a biography of one of our previous archbishops. So that's today. Tomorrow I've got meetings with Bishop Sproxton and a couple of the other key leaders in the diocese all morning. But the thing is that each day is quite different. One of the struggles, I think, both for Bishop Don and myself, is that there's a lot of administration in the diocese. So when I come into my office every morning, there'll be a great pile of documents, for example, that I have to go through and sign as the Archbishop. Now, that's a pity. In a sense, you'd think, well, anyone can sign a document. But because of the way we're set up, I've got to sign all of those things. So there's a fair bit of administration. In terms of helping people in need, one of the things that both Bishop Don and I do is we try and have visits into our parishes. Often they spread over a Friday, Saturday and Sunday. And as part of those visits, often they'll include an attempt to visit people in the parish who might be in need. They might be elderly, they might be sick, those kinds of things. Some of these agencies that we looked at during the course of the morning, Emmaus, for example, I was out there not long ago spending the morning with them, meeting the residents of the Emmaus home, celebrating Mass for them. But the truth is that I don't get out as much as I would like to. It's quite a varied life. And it's one of those things, it's one of the things I noticed when I stopped being a teacher and started working more like a parish priest and those sort of things. In a school, there's a timetable and you know where you've got to be for first period and where you've got to be after recess and when you've got yard duty and when you've got bus duty and all of those kinds of things. Your day's sort of planned out. And if you're committed to those things, well, it's very unlikely that something else is going to intervene and take you away from them. But in the life of a priest, you just don't know what's going to come up. You might be sitting at home preparing your sermon for next Sunday, and the phone might ring and it might be a funeral director saying someone has just died in the parish, and all of a sudden you've got to drop everything and deal with that. So the role of a priest or a bishop too is a bit more uncertain. You can't timetable the day too tightly. So I don't know if that helps, but that's kind of how it works, Bishop Don, isn't it? Yes, yeah.
Yes, I had the same experience when I was a parish priest. You give up pretty early putting together a list of things to do each day because you find at the end of the day you might have done one because all these other things come in. But in a way, that's the joy of pastoral work. You're there for people, and I was in a parish which was very active in the sense that the phones and the front door would be going from say about 7:30 in the morning, and it wouldn't end until 9 o'clock at night. So there was always stuff happening, but it was important stuff for the people who came to see you, and I suppose in a way you just had to find other moments when you did these other things that you wanted to do in your planning. Yeah.
Hi, my name's Kean. I'm from CBC Fremantle. There are currently 700 children in immigration detention centres run by the Australian government. These same centres have been described by the United Nations as inhumane, and the processes applied to the people in them have been likened to torture. Again and again, we have seen these findings of the UN ignored by those in power in Australia. What are the Church and its agencies currently doing to help the situation, and what could they be doing?
Well, there are a number of things. It's a very important question, and I think it touches one of these, almost key points about our society, and in a sense, about the kind of thing I was reflecting on in response to Luke's question too. This is a difficult one, I must say, because when we say what is the Church doing, we just need to remember that we're talking about, when we say the Church, often we mean what are the bishops doing or what the hierarchy is doing, and that's a fair question. But the Church is more than that. The Church is everybody. And I think the question of what the Church is doing sort of operates at a whole lot of levels. What are the bishops doing? What are the priests in our parishes doing? What are the schools that are part of the Church doing? What are the politicians who belong to the church, what are they doing? What are families doing? What are parishes doing? It's a multi-layered kind of response. You began by talking about children in detention, I think, didn't you? Yes, and I presume people here are aware of what Catholic education here in Western Australia has done, and we're not doing it at the moment because the need is not there at the moment, but you would be aware that there were a lot of children in the detention centres on Christmas Island. And one of the problems that emerged up there, and this in a sense is kind of not independent of, it needs to be thought about a bit separately from the big political issue of asylum seekers. One of the issues that emerged up there was that there were all of these children, some very young, some up to your age and a little bit older, who couldn't go to school. There was no education being provided for them. So on the island, there is a government school, and I think the government school was swamped anyway, so all they could manage was to offer, I think it was something like 2 hours once a month or once a fortnight or something. That was the only education the young people in the detention centres could get. And I don't know the reasons why, so I'll just tell you that neither the federal government nor the state government seemed to be able to come up with a solution to this problem. And so some people at the sort of top level of this issue approached the Catholic Church, and specifically the Catholic Church here in WA, and through Dr. McDonald, who I think is gone now, but through Dr. McDonald and the extraordinary work he did and the support he got from the Catholic Education Office, we opened a school on Christmas Island. And it was just like an ordinary school. We didn't build it, the facilities were there, but we put staff in and we ran the school. So the kids at least got a chance, at 8:30 in the morning or whatever it was, to leave the detention centre, come across the road, come into a normal school environment, have the normal experience of school, lessons, in the classroom, playing around in the playground, all of that sort of stuff. And that was a fantastic contribution. And we were prepared to stay there for as long as was needed. The government changed its policy. Christmas Island emptied out its detention centre as far as young people were concerned, and so the school is now in mothballs. But it's a good example of what I was talking about earlier. How can we respond practically to a need? And I think we, as part of the Catholic education community here in WA, all of us, we should be very proud that we were able to do that. So that's one answer. And I think, it's exactly what Pope Francis would say. Keep your eyes open. If you see a need and there's a way you can meet the need, then do your best to meet it. And that doesn't have to operate at the level of politics. That's just a practical response. The Church in Australia does a great deal of work in terms of advocacy to the government. Now, the Church is a national body, and so we have what's called the Australian Catholic Bishops' Conference, and through the Australian Catholic Bishops' Conference, we have a migrant and refugee office, and there's constant work being done, often behind the scenes, to try and influence the government to adopt a more humane kind of policy. So I'm not sure whether that helps. One of the things I would say is that I don't know how many of you would have been as aware before you got here this morning as you are now of the breadth of activities of the church here in WA in terms of its social outreach. I'd say that the same is true about our involvement in this issue, because through our migrant and refugee office, we are often, as well as our advocacy to politicians, we're often issuing public statements, but it's very rare that the secular media will pay them any attention. So the only thing I'd say to you is, don't presume that because it doesn't get into the press or on the news at night, it's not happening. Some parts of our society are not very interested in sort of pushing what the church is doing. We could do more. I'm not trying to say we've got it all worked out and we're fantastic, not saying that at all. We could do more, but at least there are some significant things happening. So I hope that kind of answers the question a little bit. It's a very important issue.
I think it's also good to know that here in this college There is a program for children who have come as refugees to Australia, and there may be other programs in other schools. I haven't seen them as yet, but certainly here I came and I met this group of young people, some of whom had come from Christmas Island. So when I was talking about the recent trip that I'd taken to Christmas Island with the Archbishop to see the school and to see what was being done, I saw heads nodding. You know, they knew exactly what I was talking about because they'd experienced it. And I think what this school and other schools are doing to help refugees find their place in our communities is fantastic. So that's just it's not a small thing, but it's just one of the many things that are being done on the local level. So, yeah.
Hello, I'm Cassandra from Newman College. Now, I was just wondering what made you both decide to become a priest?
So I got to year 12 and I was thinking in my own mind that I would like to become an architect. Principally, I think, because my father was a builder and I really enjoyed looking at the plans that he would develop for the buildings that he was constructing. So I really got a real love for this, and so I did the subjects at school that I needed to in order to get into university and to do architecture. However, in the last term of year 12, and we used to go right up to exam time in those days, we did a retreat. So they took us off to the monastery at North Perth, and it was there that this thought came into my mind about the priesthood. I don't know where the thought came from because it wasn't anything that I'd ever thought of before, but it was something that persisted. And by the end of the year, it was so strong a thought in my mind that I went and saw the vocations director here and told him what was going on. And next February I was in the seminary. So it happened very quickly. And then through the years of formation in the seminary, this idea of priesthood then became more and more a thing that I could see myself saying yes to. So it probably was unexpected. I can remember my grandmother saying, "I don't think you're going to get through," and all that sort of thing, because she knew me very well. But it was just this call almost at the last minute that the Lord gave to me. And maybe he was making that call in many ways during the time that I was at school. I was at a Christian Brothers school, and I was very impressed by the example that the brothers gave. They were a young group of men, and they were passionate about their life and what they were doing. And then, of course, meeting priests along the way in the various parishes that I lived in. Some of them were outstanding men, and they really, I'm sure, must have given me an experience of a life that was well worth living and one well worth imitating. So all of that, I think, is the way in which God sometimes works in your life. It's not a flash of light. It's not something that you can identify as God appearing in your life and saying something to you, but gently the Lord speaks in a way through your life and helps you make a decision as to which way you should go. So that's how I came to the seminary and came to the priesthood.
My story's a little bit different. When I was in probably around grade 4 or grade 5 or something like that, I became an altar server in our parish, as most boys in those days only, as most boys did. And because of that, I got to know the assistant priest. We had 2 priests in the parish priest and the assistant priest. And I got to know the assistant priest very well because he was the one who was in charge of looking after the altar servers. And I guess really it just boils down to the fact that I got to know him, I grew to like him, to admire him. And certainly at that age, when you're around that age, in grade 6, that sort of thing, you can be impressed by people, older people, and think, I wouldn't mind being like that when I grow up. You know, you just meet someone and might be a sporting star, or might be, you know, might even be your dad and the career that he's in or whatever. For me, it was this priest. I just was impressed by him, admired him, and somehow or other this thought came into my mind, I wouldn't mind being like him when I grow up. So that's where the idea originally came from. Then I went off to secondary. I should say that one of the things about it was that I used to go down to the church on Saturday mornings because he used to get me to wash his car. So that was how I got a bit of pocket money. And one day the parish priest stuck his nose out the back door and he said, how much is Father Brown, his name was, how much is Father Brown paying you to wash his car? And I told him, and he said, that much? And I said, yes. He said, well, I'll give you the same if you'll wash my car as well. So I got kind of caught up in just the ordinary life of the priests and got to know them and got to admire them. I then went off to secondary school and went to a school that was run by this religious order that I eventually joined. And so the idea of being a priest then got kind of teamed up with the idea of joining this group of men and with the idea that I wanted to be a teacher. And it took me a while. I was 23 before I finally made the decision to go into the seminary. So it takes a while for some people for the penny to drop. I wanted to be a teacher, wanted to be a priest, and suddenly dawned on me, well, I could do both if I joined this group. So that was how it started with me. Somebody I admired, someone I looked up to. As a little kid, a bit of hero worship, I suppose. I thought I wouldn't mind being like him when I grow up. That's where it started. Of course, where it starts, the reason why you might think about it at the start and the reason why you might decide to keep going with it, they can be very different things. So yes, I left school, worked in a few different jobs, eventually went to teachers' college, and it was while I was at teachers' college I decided to put the ideas of being a teacher and a priest together. But so that was how it started anyway. So.
Hi, my name's Rosie. I go to Arranmore Catholic College, and I was wondering what support can Catholic people offer in regards to assisting people with disabilities?
So just in case people didn't catch it, what support can the Catholic Church, I guess you mean, or Catholics generally, offer to people with disabilities? Again, there are probably a couple of quick responses that I could give, and the Bishop might want to add something, but we did actually see a number of those agencies that are part of LifeLink, the LifeLink family, that offer support. So there's the Emmanuel Centre, which is in East Perth, which cares for people with intellectual disabilities. On the same property, there's a centre that cares for people who are deaf or have impaired hearing. So there are those sorts of things. There's the Emmaus Centre that we saw that also cares for people with intellectual disabilities. There's Identity WA, which is a very big organisation under the umbrella of the church, which cares for people primarily with physical disabilities, but also, I think, intellectual disabilities. There's another group called Personal Advocacy, which cares for people with intellectual disabilities primarily, but particularly in helping them integrate into local Catholic parish communities. So there are a lot of things happening already, and I think the church actually has a good story to tell, if I can put it that way, in our attempt to reach out to people and help them. I think, though, that, and the other thing I would say, that is many of our schools, and the number is growing all the time, are getting much better at making sure that their facilities are adequate for people, for students who can come into the school and shouldn't be excluded just because they've got a disability. So in many ways, I think that's what we're doing at the moment. One of the keys to responding to people with disability, I think, is this recognition that everybody, no matter what their particular circumstances, is of equal value and of equal dignity and needs to be and deserves to be and has a right to be treated with great dignity. And so I think a Catholic community, whether it be a school community like here at Arranmore, whether it be a parish community, whether it be any other form of Catholic community, it needs to make an awareness of the need to care for people with disabilities as one of its key priorities. So I'm not sure if I've answered the question. They're the sorts of things we are doing. In many ways, it goes back to what I said earlier. In the end, we're either going to be people who've got a heart for this, or we're going to be people who don't have a heart for it. So as in everything, this is going to come back to what kind of people we're becoming and what we're doing to shape ourselves into the people that we want to be. I know that's kind of a very general answer, but I think it's actually an important one. But Bishop Don, you might be aware of other things.
Through Identity WA, which is a Catholic organisation, a very large amount of their attention is given to people, young people especially, who have a disability and whose families are looking forward towards the day when they can no longer look after them. And houses are constructed in various parts of the metropolitan area where these young people can finally go and live with others in a sort of a community. And they go to work, they go to sheltered workshops and other sorts of employment where they're able to function, and come back each night to the house, but they're still connected with their family. But oftentimes it's at that time when the parents are no longer able to look after them. So that's a very practical way in which we're providing a service which is very, very much appreciated by families.
Hi, I'm Michaela from Prindiville Catholic College. You spoke before about taking responsibility for changing or moulding your heart. As young ambassadors, that we are, how can we inspire others to take responsibility or want to take responsibility for changing their heart?
The first thing I'd say is we won't be able to inspire others to do anything we're not doing ourselves. So that takes me back to what I've said a couple of times, and I think, I don't know whether you would agree with me or not, but I do have this strong sense that people of your age, people at secondary school, you really are at the most important stage of your life in terms of shaping yourselves. So I just want to repeat that again. And I also want to say that for me as the Archbishop, and I am an enormous supporter of our Catholic schools and our Catholic education system, one of the reasons is that I think our Catholic schools are set up in such a way as to provide a fantastic opportunity for young people to grab hold of the challenge of shaping yourselves if you want to. I think everything is there in a Catholic school in terms of the religious education program, the pastoral care, the leadership programs, all of those different things which make up part of the life of a Catholic school, on top, of course, of all of the normal things, the academic and sporting and all of those things. I think Catholic schools are really well placed, and so I'd say to all of you, you actually have at your fingertips this fantastic resource, which is your school and your staff and all of those people and each other. So that would be the first thing. Then I would say that the thing that most inspires anybody to do anything, I think, is to see somebody else doing something. You know, I just talked about what made me decide I wanted to be a priest. I was inspired by seeing a man that I liked and I admired and I wanted to emulate. I think if each one of us takes the challenge to... I know this can sound a bit airy-fairy, so I apologise for that, but I think it's important to do what we can to make ourselves the best human being we can possibly be, and allow all of those other people around us who want to help us do that, then you will become, you talked about being ambassadors, you will become, just by yourself being who you are, a kind of an inspiration, that's a big word, but an inspiration to other people. Now, they're not all going to say very consciously necessarily, look at what she's doing, isn't she fantastic, I'm going to be like her. But just by being in an environment where there are a whole lot of people who take the task of doing what they can to be the best that they can be, that will create an atmosphere. And that will in itself support that endeavour. So I think, first of all, to recognise the great opportunity you have by being a member of a Catholic school community, and then to also reflect on the fact that because none of us is independent of anybody else, we're all interconnected, and the things that you do at school, if they're good things and are good role models or good examples, that's what people will see and follow. If they're bad examples, that could be what people see and follow. So we all have a responsibility to each other. I think you should see yourselves as one part, and each one of you is an essential part of a community that together is supporting this effort to be the best people we can be. So that's how I would see it. I suppose that's why I'm such a supporter of Catholic schools.
I think that was a very, very good answer. The desire to make a difference in the world. I spoke to Seton College about this recently. The desire to do something which is going to have a lasting effect upon society is, I hope, the dream that many of our young people coming through our schools will have when they leave. They enter into their lives in the world, but they won't be just focused on themselves, but focused on what can be done to make our society a better one. And I think every Year 12 student who comes to the end of their journey of education through our schools leaves the school with a certain idealism. And I think if that can be kept alive, that will be translated, I think, into the professions that they go into or the other workplaces that they'll be in. And it'll be demonstrated, I think, by the values that they live by. I'm always confident that we are going to have this tremendous effect upon our society because of what our young people receive through education. Thank you.